if you need to have a difficult conversation with your aging mother, you might say, hey, Mom, we need to have a difficult conversation about your finances, or a difficult conversation about your living arrangements, or whatever the thing might be. I mean, I am a little bit upset, but I think it's something that I want to have a good and productive conversation with you. Are you available this weekend to do that? So now you have 3, 4, 5 days where she can brace and prepare herself. So having the buffer and letting a person brace themselves in a way that is good for them is important. Gentlemen, welcome to the Order of Man podcast. Thank you for being here today. This is our Wednesday episode. It's our Ask Me Anything, where we field questions from guys all over our following, whether it's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or our exclusive brotherhood called the Iron Council. Now, normally today I'm joined by my co-host Kip Sorensen, but he just informed me a couple of days ago that he is taking his family to Disneyland. Now, why any man would ever take his family to Disneyland is beyond me. That is the unhappiest place on earth. You can spend thousands and thousands of dollars and just have a miserable time where everybody walks away loving each other a little bit less and being a lot more impatient towards each other. So, but nonetheless, that's where he's at, and we got to give Kip a hard time. He is a good family man. He made a bad choice on this one, and I hope he listens because he needs to know. But in that case, you are running solo with me today. So I'm going to answer some of these questions that we have, and I'm also going to share with you a headline that we normally do every Wednesday as well. So I'll just jump right into this on the headline. I read over the weekend that the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, just had an audit, as they do every year, and for the 7th consecutive year in a row, they have failed their audit, meaning that there is money that is unaccounted for, and not just a few dollars here and there. It's a lot of money, billions and billions of our dollars, taxpayer dollars, that the government cannot figure out where it's going, how it's being spent, and why it's not accounted for. Now, good news, though, and I say that very sarcastically, as I'm reading through this article, and this comes from Fox 10 in Phoenix, it looks like, and this was the best information I could find on it here. It said that the Michael McCord, he's the Undersecretary of Defense, also known as the Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer, said, quote unquote, the agency has turned a corner in its understanding of the depth and breadth of its challenges. Well, gee, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you taking care of our money over the past 7 years so you can understand how difficult it is for you to track money. He also said this: so if someone had a report card that is half good and half not good, I don't know that you could call the student or the report card a failure. What a loser. Okay, this is not an exercise that you can compartmentalize. If you can't account for billions and billions of our taxpayer dollars, that's a failure. Not just because part of what you have done is good by your own standard, but if you can't account for these assets and this money, yes, that we could all call that a failure. And that's exactly what you're doing. Now, he also said in here, and I'm failing to pull up the quote, so I'm not quoting directly, but to paraphrase what he said is that he is confident by the year 2028, they'll be able to have a good, successful audit where they can actually account for everything. By 2028, 4 years from now. So I can't deal with this kind of stuff. Like, it is unbelievable to me that we, the American public, and the men in this country continue to allow this nonsense to take place. In what universe would you or any of the men listening be a CEO or a CFO of an organization and for 7 years in a row can't account for the finances of that organization and still have a job? It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, I did see that Congress is trying to pass some legislation, and one of the bills that I saw was up for proposal is that if they fail to provide a successful audit of their finances, then 1% of the allocated budget then is returned back to, back to the government, which is where it is now. I'd say turn it back to the taxpayers, but so be it. They have a massive budget, $824 billion budget. So we're not talking about pennies here. But what I would suggest, instead of returning that 1% back to the government, which is where it is anyways, what I would suggest is that for any person in charge, Mr. Mike McCord, and any officers in charge over at the Pentagon, and specifically the 28 Department of Defense reporting entities, that those men and or women who are head of those department, if they cannot complete a successful audit of where every dollar, every dime of our American taxpayer dollars have gone, then they lose not only their income, but they lose their pension when they step into retirement. There has to be accountability. And you can't do a piss poor job with our hard-earned money and then expect that you're going to reap the benefits. And by the way, the benefits also of our hard-earned dollars. You don't get to come in here and do whatever you want, run it however you want, don't track for it, don't account for it, and then think that we're going to continue to pay you, not just while you're employed by the federal government, but then in perpetuity until the day that you die. If you can't get it right, you lose your job, you lose your income, and you lose your pension when you retire. Now, I'm hoping that some of this stuff changes when Mr. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy come in as the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, as it's affectionately referred to as, where we can start looking at this. And I know that this audit issue, to put it mildly, is certainly on Vivek's radar because he has talked explicitly about it. So that's my headline. Got fired up today and this morning, and this stuff's absolutely crazy, and we need some accountability. Not just, hey, we're going to return money back. No, there's going to be consequences. There are going to be consequences. In fact, I would even say there should be not only the income loss and the pension loss, but we ought to start talking about criminal charges. If you can't account for taxpayer dollars, something is happening, and I would argue that it's either just gross incompetence or fraud, or probably both. And so we need to start looking at real consequences so we can actually address these real issues. All right. With that said, let's get into some of your questions today. Again, these come from Instagram, Facebook, and then I'll get to some questions inside of our exclusive brotherhood, the Iron Council. This first one, these are leftovers from last week, but the first one, it's just a kind of a comment in passing, but I thought I'd address it anyways. How early did I wake up today? On the weekdays, I wake up at about 5 or 5:30, just somewhere in there. Usually my alarm is set for 5:30, but I usually wake up at 5, 5:10, 5:15, somewhere in there. I get up, I get going, I get into the gym. I'm in the gym at 6 o'clock. I do an hour worth of working out, and it's all consists of strength training. I've been sitting in the sauna for 15, 20 minutes every morning, and I've been enjoying that lately, but that's what time I get up. On the weekends, depending on whether or not my kids are with me or what I have going on, I'm usually up around 6 o'clock. So that's pretty consistent across the board, 5:30 to 6 o'clock. And guys, it doesn't really matter what time you get up. What matters is that you give yourself adequate time to do what you know you should be doing. So if you've got to leave at 8 o'clock for the office, you probably should not be waking up at 7:30. I would say give yourself a solid 2 hours before you get going. So if you leave at 8, you should wake up at 6. If you leave at 7, you should wake up at 5. Now that varies a little bit. I'm just giving you a general rule of thumb, but I think that allows you to get up. That allows you to go through your morning routine. That gives you an hour, 45 minutes or so, depending on where your gym is, to work out. It gets you back, gets you an opportunity to clean up and get yourself presenting well for the day, maybe even spend a little time with the kids for breakfast before you head out the door. But that would be my recommendation. 2 hours before you leave the house for the day. This next one, oh, by the way, that question came from BYMJ. This one comes from Front End Jockey. He says, as a man, how can I build my self-esteem levels in a way that they'll be through the roof? I like this question more than the sister question we get to this one, which is, how does a man build confidence? And I don't really think you can build confidence directly. I think it can be built and it can be fostered and developed, but I don't think you can directly build confidence. What you do is you build competence and belief in yourself. And as a byproduct of the competence and the belief in yourself, naturally you're going to have more confidence. It's a lot like saying, if somebody says, I'm sad, and you ask, well, why are you sad? And they can't really articulate why they're sad. It's kind of a wasted emotion at that point. Or I'm happy, or I'm glad, I'm angry, I'm bitter, I'm contentious, I'm frustrated. If you don't know why that's the case, I'm not saying that you shouldn't experience the emotion, but I think you ought to get to the root of the issue so that you don't just fix being sad. You actually start doing the activities that make you happier. You do the activities that give you fulfillment. So a lot of guys will think, well, I just want to be more confident, but they never connect the dots to what is it that you need to do to be confident. And that's why I like this question is, how can I build my self-esteem levels so that they're through the roof? And then, of course, obviously the confidence comes with it. And maybe it's semantics, but I hope you understand the point. Really, the most succinct answer that I can give you for building self-esteem or building confidence is simply this: make and keep important commitments to yourself. Make and keep important commitments to yourself. Now, you can make all sorts of commitments, but if they don't have any weight in your own mind, they're not valuable to you, then it doesn't really matter, because you can say a lot of flippant things and be wishy-washy about it, or say something and know deep in your heart of hearts that it doesn't really mean much to you. So you have to make a valuable, important, fulfilling commitment, and then you have to follow through on it. That's it. So to go back earlier when the other gentleman was asking what time I wake up, if one of your commitments through the end of the year is to lose 10 pounds and build and develop your strength, drink more water, get more sleep, lock in your nutrition, et cetera, that's all meaningful, right? I think most of us would agree that that has purpose and value built into it. So that's the fulfilling, meaningful commitment that you're making to yourself. And then you actually have to follow through. And you can't just do it once, you have to do it consistently. So if you get up and go to the gym this morning, your self-esteem is going to go up. It's not going to go up, to quote him, through the roof. That comes over time. And the most important thing about keeping commitments to yourself is it counts more when you don't want to do it or you have excuses not to do it. It counts more. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to reap a whole lot more benefit just because you're doing it when you don't want to do it. But from a self-esteem perspective, it counts more because you know you didn't want to get out of bed today. You know you had the hardship of dealing with kids or your wife or having a long night the night before or whatever your excuse is. You know that was present and yet you still did it. So when it comes to building self-esteem, again, it counts more when you know you don't want to do it. I don't think you're going to build self-esteem. There's a friend of mine who very fit. He's in the gym every time I'm there, which probably means he's at the gym when I'm not there. And I asked him about, something about getting out of bed, or was it hard or something? I can't remember exactly what I asked. And he says, no, it's not really hard. It's just so built into my routine and I enjoy it. It's not that challenging. So I'm not discounting him and the fact that he's still working out and training and doing what he needs to do for his own health. But I do discount the amount of confidence it's going to build in him. It's a little bit like the law of diminishing returns. If you do something long enough and it becomes such a habit or you enjoy it so much, it's no longer a challenge for you. And therefore, it's not going to build your self-esteem as much as something that was very difficult and challenging for you to do and you overcame it. By the way, that's not an excuse to stop working out or stop working hard in your career aspirations or investing in your wife or investing in your children. Of course, you should do those things, but it's the challenging things that make it meaningful. So again, to recap, find something that's meaningful, make a commitment to doing it for a long period of time, and then follow through on that commitment, and you will be unstoppable. The only other thing I'd add to that too is whatever vices you might have or thought patterns, beliefs, behaviors that are keeping you from having some self-esteem, we need to find ways to get rid of that. So, for example, I know a lot of guys who deal with substance abuse issues, who deal with pornography addiction, and every time one of those individuals engages in that behavior, when he's made a commitment not to, it diminishes the self-esteem. So you might have been riding high, and then all of a sudden you slip into drug or alcohol abuse, you slip into pornography use, and then you just undid everything that you worked to develop when it comes to your self-esteem. So build the self-esteem by making commitments and keeping them, and then removing those hurdles, obstacles, vices, challenges, struggles, and behaviors that you're trying to get rid of. If you do that, you will be unstoppable. This one comes from Al Decker, 1970. I really enjoy listening to the podcast. Keep up the good work. My question is this. I have a lot of folks with different political views on Facebook and other platforms, some on the right and others on the left. I call myself a traditional conservative. I'm seeing a lot of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish sentiment out there disguised as anti-Zionism. A lot of this comes from my far-right friends who have little use for Jews anyways. That's kind of a weird phrase. I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. Personally, I support the idea of the Jewish state and, if possible, a two-state solution. The question is, how do I deal with these people, some of whom I've known on social media for decades? I'm really sick to death of seeing all the anti-Semitic BS. There is an increase of anti-Semitism in Europe, but all those folks do is blame the Zionist. It would be a shame to cut all these folks loose, but I can't see any other way. I'm not really going to get too much into my beliefs on it. I know there is obviously a lot of anti-Semitism that floats around, and I'm sure it comes from both sides of the political spectrum and the cultural spectrum. The phrase that he said is, a lot of this comes from my far-right friends who have little use for Jews anyways. I don't personally know anybody who thinks that. It's a very weird thing to say. I've never come across anybody who said that. Not just Jews, but any person. Like I can't imagine somebody saying, I don't have any use for black people, or I don't have any use for Asians. It's a weird thing, but I'm not the person you're talking about, so maybe you have heard that. I think a lot of the anti-Semitism that we are seeing, personally, I think a lot of it comes from the left, especially as we see this conflict between Israel and Palestine. I see it more heavily weighted on the left. And I also think on the right, it possibly could be on the increase. I don't know for sure, but at least intuitively or anecdotally, I might think that it's coming to a head or increasing on the right, because conservatives are typically going to try to keep themselves, maybe not historically, but I think a new perspective is, hey, we don't want to get involved in foreign conflicts. I don't think it's the U.S.'s job to police the world. Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. It's not our job. Now, I'm not anti-involvement. I'm not a isolationist, for example, or isolationist, I should say. I think that there is a vested interest in us being involved to some degree. For example, in Russia, if we can send support, financial support to Ukraine, and Ukraine can diminish to the degree that it has the Russian military, I actually think that's probably in the United States' best interest. We don't have to send soldiers over there. We can send support, financial support, and weapon systems and things like this without having to get involved, and it completely just obliterates and decimates the Russian military. Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good thing for America. So I'm not completely anti let's be involved, at all, but also I'm not a fan of sending billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to these foreign conflicts when there's no real interest in us doing that. I know that there's the side of it that says that we need to help the world and spread democracy. I spent time in Iraq in 2005, 2006. And from what I saw to some degree and what I've seen since, many of these cultures are not interested in our version of democracy and freedom. And it's not my job to make them believe they should. That's their job. So I'm getting a little bit off on a tangent when I say that. And by the way, another tangent I could get on is Biden greenlighting using missiles, American missiles, to launch into Russia. That's a whole other conversation, which obviously is not a good idea to say the least. But back to this question for Al, he says, how do I deal with these folks? I don't want to cut them off. I mean, I think to the degree that they're being anti-Semitic, I mean, I'm not really interested in being in a relationship with somebody who's like overtly racist and is contentious and creating problems and is just toxic about everything. And so maybe you do have people that you're just not interested in dealing with anymore, and that's fine, especially if it's just done through social media. No good is ever going to come from debating whether or not there should be or even can be a two-state solution in Israel and Palestine. Like, how's that going to work on social media? It's not. But there might be other people who just believe differently than you. And I think that there's this cultural tendency to villainize other people who believe differently than you. For example, my far right friends. Now, you didn't say right wingers. That right wing phrase, same thing with libtards or snowflakes. Like, those insults are designed to ostracize and to be contentious. Now, there might be some element of accuracy in statements like those, and obviously it's a bit hyperbole, but if somebody's attempting to make you an enemy out of these things, that's probably somebody you need to cut off. But just because somebody disagrees with you, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Al, but if somebody disagrees with you, it doesn't mean that they're racist. It doesn't mean that they're anti-Semitic. I mean, we hear that all the time. Somebody that has an issue with and Ben Shapiro does this actually. And Ben Shapiro is somebody I highly respect. But if somebody disagrees with the way Israel is handling their conflict, he'll call it anti-Semitic. Well, it's not anti-Semitic to have a disagreement. So I would ask you, Al, are you appropriately labeling or categorizing what is actually happening? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but it's something to consider. And there might just be some people in your life who you're just not interested in having certain conversations with. And that's okay too. But you have to decide, and I think it's a bit of a spectrum based on, is this person somebody I want in my life at all? I'd say on social media, like if it's creating drama and problems for you, easy fix, get rid of it. If it's somebody close to you, that's where it would be, I think, more subject to interpretation. So I hope that helps. I think I got off on a lot of tangents on that one, but I have a lot of opinions on everything. So Trout Junkie says, how was my hunt? It was a good hunt. I was in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago. I ended up shooting a doe, and I thought I made a good shot. For those of you who are hunters, she was quartered towards me, I think, more than I thought she was. So I made a good shot on entry, hit her right behind the shoulder. I just think it exited a little far back, so maybe I got into her guts. Maybe I got one lung but didn't get both, and we followed blood, and I looked for hours and hours, and I never could find her, unfortunately. I missed an opportunity on a buck that I just wasn't paying as good attention as I should have, and missed a good opportunity on a good buck, and he just sat right out of range for half an hour just taunting me. So unfortunately, I didn't harvest a deer this year on that hunt, but still a good time with 9-10 friends that I go out. This is my 7th year, I think, so we always have a good time out there. So it was good. It was good. All in all, it was good, although not successful based on me not bringing a deer home. All right, let's jump over to Facebook. I'm going to reload this because I think some questions came up as we were talking here. So this one comes from Bob Ross, and Bob is one of our top contributors over in the Facebook group. That's at facebook.com/groups/Order of Man. He says, what techniques do you use when you know you must have a difficult conversation with a family member? My situation specifically is with an aging mother. Yeah, I don't know the conversation that you need to have, but if you listen to my podcast that I did several weeks ago with Jefferson Fisher, it was a phenomenal conversation, and he talked about the importance of giving people an opportunity to brace or prepare themselves for these types of conversations. And the more serious the conversation, the more buffer you need to give them. And I'll explain that in a minute. And then he also shared some insights on how to have these in a direct, impactful way, but not pander to the person, not make them feel dumb, and actually get to an appropriate place. So let's start with a buffer first. If you need to have a difficult conversation with your aging mother, you might say, hey, Mom, we need to have a difficult conversation about your finances, or a difficult conversation about your living arrangements, or whatever the thing might be. And I'm not upset. I mean, I am a little bit upset, but I think it's something that I want to have a good and productive conversation with you. Are you available this weekend to do that? So now you have 3, 4, 5 days where she can brace and prepare herself. And if it's something minor like, hey, Mom, I don't want you giving candy to the kids. Like, we're trying to help them be healthy, and too much candy, like, we're trying to cut back on that. I don't think that something like that needs as much of a buffer. So having the buffer and letting a person brace themselves in a way that is good for them is important. I would also say be aware of it, because as a person who is more of an anxious attachment style, if my girlfriend comes to me, for example, and says, hey, I need to talk with you tonight, so, carve out some time. As an anxious attachment style, that would drive me crazy. It would be a non-productive day. I'd be in my head. I'd be worried. I think, the relationship's over. She's mad, like whatever. Doom and gloom is my personality. So if you give the person a little bit of a heads up, like if she said, hey, I need to talk with you tonight about our plans over Thanksgiving weekend. A few things have changed. Not a big deal. I just wanted to keep you in the loop. Okay, that's fair, because now I can know a little bit about what it's about without having to, lose my mind about it all day and be non-productive, but still have the conversation she needs to have with me. So that's important. The second thing is, when you're actually having these conversations, the first thing that you should do is help them brace for that conversation. And Jefferson suggested saying this: hey, I would like to have this conversation with you. It's not going to be fun. It might be tense. It's not going to be enjoyable for either one of us, but it's something that we need to address. Now, that's really hard, because what a lot of people will do is they'll try to tap the brakes and make it easier for a person before they even have the conversation. Like, hey, I love you, and how are things? And they small talk, and it's awkward. And then it's like, oh, by the way, you can't live here in the casita anymore. Like, that's not, you're teeing somebody up for failure. I know you're trying to let them down easy, and you're trying to make it easier on yourself, but the best thing that you can do is confront it head on. Another thing that he suggested is that you should always come away with the outcome first, so that you can work towards what it is you're after. Because I know in the past, maybe when I was less assertive, I would have this idea of a conversation I wanted to have, and then I would start talking with the person, and I would feel bad, and my conscience would get the better of me, and the nice guy syndrome would sneak in, and all of a sudden we have a conversation and I didn't actually get to the end result that I wanted, because I was more worried about their feelings than I was about the result. And we should be aware of their feelings for sure, but the result is crucial. So with your mom, the result might be, maybe there's some boundaries that you need to have in place. Again, I'm guessing. I don't know what it is. But if it's boundaries, it might go something like this: hey, Mom, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. It's not one I want to have. It's not one that's going to be, I think, real enjoyable for either of us. But it's important to me that I identify and communicate some boundaries that I have with you that I think have been getting a little loose over the years and causing some contention and friction in our relationship. So I would like to talk about what those boundaries are and help you understand what my boundaries are, so that we can come to a place where we can have the kind of relationship that I want to have in a really healthy way. So you were fair, you were direct, you were clear, but you made no qualms about the fact that she's stepping over the line and not honoring your boundaries. Or maybe she doesn't even know what they are because you haven't communicated them before. So, and then the last little bit of advice I would give you on this is you might explain some rules of engagement. And I don't think that you need to get too granular immediately, but a rule of engagement might be, hey, mom, as we have this conversation, I know we've talked about this in the past, and at times it's got heated, and you've said some things, and I've said some things to you that I'm not proud of and regret. And I just want to tell you, I want to have this conversation without yelling at each other, without resorting to insults and attacks. I just want to have a healthy, productive conversation. That's a rule of engagement. So now if she steps over the line, you can come back to it and say, hey, mom, remember I said I don't want to yell at each other. I don't want to result to insults. So I'm going to ask that you don't do that because I don't tolerate being treated like that. That's one of my boundaries. And I'd love to continue to have this discussion. We can do that now, or we can do it later when we can both agree that we're not going to belittle or insult each other. What's best for you? So having the rules of engagement allow the conversation to go smoothly in a way that you've identified and get you to the result that you've identified. I hope that helps. I don't have the context, so I hope that helps as much as it can. This next one comes from Eric Swanson. He says this, I've been looking for a job for over a year. I have gone through all of my savings, and I'm currently working in a coffee shop to make ends meet. By the way, Eric, I will say without reading the rest of your conversation here, your question, I just actually want to commend you, because the way that I'm hearing you say this is that you don't want to be working at the coffee shop. It sounds like you're probably overqualified to be there, but you're doing it to make ends meet. And I want to say there's something to be said for that. My wife makes good money, but we're living like we had two incomes, a mistake, I know. Where would you start over? I've had nearly 20 years of public sector experience, but cannot seem to get back into a role in that field. I've been working on building a digital marketing business, but that's been a long road. Well, okay, so a couple of things. Where should you start over? You can't really start over. That's part of the problem because you've got some debt, I assume. And what I would suggest to you, first things first, is because you have been living like you had two incomes, is maybe you have to sell some things. You know, maybe one of the cars needs to go. Maybe you have 3 cars. Maybe you have a dirt bike. Maybe you have a 4-wheeler. Maybe you have a bunch of tools. Like, what is it that can go that you can then take that money and build up a savings because your savings is diminished now, or potentially pay off debt on one car. And if you're driving around a 2024, Ford F-250, maybe you ought to sell that and instead get a 2000 F-150. And I know people always, they always buck this. They're like, oh no, I can't do that because of this. And then no, like if it's serious enough, you got to do what you got to do. And that's how you start over, by making better decisions right now and managing the current situation that you're in. Now at the coffee shop, you're probably making minimum wage or slightly over. So you're not making a lot of money. And I don't know if you're working full time, but if you're not, maybe you need to pick up a second gig or a second job. I would also suggest to you, because of your public sector experience, you have 20 years in it. I don't know if you've tapped into your network. You have 20 years in that business. If you don't have networks and connections and contacts and resources, I've got to ask, what were you doing for 20 years? This is a moment where it's okay to be humble, and maybe you've done this, but to be humble and ask for help. I'm not saying ask for somebody to pay your mortgage payment by any means. I'm saying call Jim up and say, hey, Jim, we used to work together at public sector. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's law enforcement, or maybe it's school teacher education. I don't know what that is, but let's just say it's law enforcement. Hey, Jim, like you're over at the department and man, I'm just really struggling. Do you know of any departments in the area that are looking for more officers? Or do you know if there's a job inside of the department that's not me patrolling necessarily, but maybe it's administration or secretarial or like whatever, so that maybe you can get yourself back in the door. But if you don't have those contacts, then I would suggest to you that you start networking with those people because you have friends. So just start calling them up and be honest with them. Don't be sneaky. Don't be tricky. Don't beat around the bush. Call up Jim. Hey, Jim, I know it's been a long time. I should have kept in contact. I haven't, but I'm struggling right now. I've been looking for a job in our field for a year and I'm not having any luck. And I wanted to ask humbly if you have heard of anything or seen of anything. And if you do, please let me know. If something comes up down the road, please, can I be the first one that you call? Like, this is the time where you need to start really being humble and really asking for the help that you need. Not a handout, just an assist, just like you would do if somebody that you knew called and asked you. And then the last thing I would say on this one, Eric, is I would say Dave Ramsey has some really, really good information on the situation that you're in. So if you haven't gone through Financial Peace University, I would highly suggest that you look into his. I don't agree with everything, especially when it comes to building wealth and real estate and business. He doesn't talk about that a lot, although that's how he built his wealth. But he also knows who his audience is, and you are his audience. 2 incomes went down to 1, out of work, dwindled all savings. What do I do now? He's phenomenal. He's got a lot of great information in that department. So Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University. Also a previous podcast guest. This one comes from Zachary Nay. When is it time to end a relationship? I've been with my girlfriend for 3 years. We share similar values, long-term goals, and we don't have children or major commitments. However, she makes it difficult for me to focus on my side business after my 9 to 5. It's always a struggle to pursue my passion, and she would rather I spend the time with her. Should I try to navigate this challenge given our shared values, or consider finding someone who would be more supportive of my ambitions? I think there's a lot of false premise here. Zachary, I don't know your situation, so maybe I'm making some wrong assumptions, but there's some things that stood out to me as you were saying this. You said here, she would rather I spend that time with her. Well, of course, that's a good thing because she cares about you and wants to be with you. You said, consider finding someone who would be more supportive of my ambitions. Is she not supportive of your ambitions? Or does she just want to spend time with you? And secondary to that is, would finding somebody else really be the answer? Because I think somebody else would probably want to spend time with you as well. So I'm assuming that, and I have to assume just for the sake of this question, that you haven't had these types of conversations with her yet, other than just saying, hey, I need somebody who supports my mission. The way I would come at it, and maybe you've done this, maybe you haven't, but the way that I would come at it is, hey, babe, listen, I work from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and you also know I'm really trying to build this side business. I'm doing that for me. It's important. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I'm also doing it for our future relationship. I want to be a man who can be a provider for you and me, and if we decide to bring kids into the world, for them as well. But I also know your priorities are a priority to me. And so I want to talk with you about what it would look like ideally if I was able to work on this side business that I really believe in for me and for us, but also give you the time and attention that you deserve and that I want to give to you because I love being with you. And open it up that way, because maybe she says, hey, babe, I don't mind you doing the business. I'm really glad you're doing the business. I would just like to see you 3 nights a week. Okay, you might be able to do that. So you might say, all right, well, that's fair. And I would say in a relationship, that's a fair request. So maybe that's, hey, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm working on the side business, but Tuesday and Thursday evenings, those are our evenings. I don't work. I don't do anything else. We do date nights. We do all the things. Saturday is our days, our date night as well. And then Sunday, we have all day together. But you two can come up with the rules and they can be whatever they want or whatever you want. It doesn't have to be my rules. It doesn't have to work for my relationship or somebody else's. It has to work for your relationship. But unless you're having those conversations with her, you really don't know what she's even asking you. Because she might be saying, hey, I just want to spend more time with you. And she might even just be saying that as a compliment. For example, when I was gone, I texted my girlfriend. I'm like, hey, I miss you. That didn't mean I needed her to do anything. It didn't mean that I needed more from her. It just meant I miss you. That's it. I'm out here hunting. I'm having a good time. I hope you're staying busy. You're doing well. I miss you, period. So she might just be saying, hey, I just want to spend more time with you. I would take that more as a compliment than I would an indictment, unless you know for sure, and you can't know for sure unless you've had that discussion with her. Now, I will address one other thing. As far as ending the relationship, I don't know if it's to that point yet, but if you've had these conversations about values and goals and she doesn't believe in that at all, that's a problem. And you don't have commitments and you don't have children. And based on the way you're saying it, I imagine you guys you don't own a house together, for example. You said you have no major commitments. So that's a good thing. I would suggest until you start working through some of these issues, because there's a lot of contention here, it sounds like, that you don't bring in any of those major commitments, kids, mortgages, these types of things, until you get this stuff figured out. The other thing is what you're doing might just be a season. Maybe it's for the next year or two while you get this thing off the ground and you've talked with other people about how long it takes and that's what they're suggesting and recommending, and you're able to communicate that with her. But it sounds like there's a lot more conversation that needs to take place. But yeah, at some point, not now, I don't think today, but at some point, if you've had these discussions and she just does not want you working and you are adamant that you are going to work in the evenings, it's not going to work. It's only going to get worse. Again, I'm not advocating for that. I'm not even telling you to do that. But was your question, and that's the point that it could potentially get to unless you're willing to have the good, mature conversations I shared with you. All right, let's jump over to our exclusive brotherhood. This, again, is called the Iron Council. If you want to know more about it, you can head to orderaman.com/Iron Council. All right, we'll take 3 or 4 here. So Bryce Fishbach says, how do you find the balance between allowing your children to struggle, suffer, and experience hardship with the need to nurture and protect them? Well, nurturing is one thing, protecting is different. Protecting is making sure that they don't hurt themselves or somebody or something else doesn't hurt them. That's what protection is. Nurturing, the same way you would nurture a garden, is not necessarily protecting, but it's giving them the tools and resources they need to develop, grow, and thrive. So let me give you an example if we're going to use the gardening analogy. If you have a peach tree, every once in a while, you're going to go to the tree and you're going to prune the tree. You're going to prune some of the limbs, some of the boughs, some of the branches. You're going to prune them back. You're going to pick some of the fruit off of there so all the nutrients can go to fewer fruit and the healthy fruit. So on one hand, you could say, well, I'm damaging the tree. I'm literally cutting branches off of this tree and I'm picking the fruit before it's ripe. I'm damaging this tree. But you're not actually damaging it. You're nurturing it. You're exposing that tree, if you want to say it this way, to hardship in order that it will thrive and grow and develop into this big, robust, beautifully producing fruit tree. It's the same thing with your children. To nurture your children means to get them involved in experiences and information and thought processes, even though not comfortable, will serve them over a long period of time. Now, the way men and women nurture generally is different. So, for example, if you have a young child and you're teaching that child to ride their bike, and you're pushing them down and you finally let go, the training wheels are off, and the kid goes 50 yards and then crashes, mom runs over there, oh my goodness, runs over, picks him up, wipes off the boo-boo and like blows on it and kisses it and puts a little SpongeBob or My Little Pony Band-Aid on their knee. That's nurturing. It's not wrong. It's just supportive. It's nurturing. What a man does is he goes and says, oh, bud, that's okay. Get up, wipe it off, and let's get you back on. I know you're scared, but let's get you back on. I'll be right here. I'm not going to let go of you, but we need to do it immediately. Let's go. Neither one of those were wrong, but they're both different ways of nurturing based on generally what men and women each bring to the equation. Women bring love and kindness and compassion and empathy, and men bring encouragement and toughness and resilience and fortitude to the equation. So that's important to differentiate. And then what I would say is that when you have a child who's suffering in hardship, make sure that first it's meaningful, because if it's not meaningful, then you're just banging your head against the wall. And I don't think banging your head against the wall unnecessarily is going to make you tougher. I just don't. I think it's going to give you brain damage. Now, I used to probably agree more with, hey, just do hard things because it's hard. No, do it with purpose. Do it because it's meaningful. And we're not at a shortage of hardship. So it's not like I have to do this hardship that's miserable and that's going to hurt me, or I can't do anything. There's plenty of opportunities to be confronted with hardship. With children, sports primarily is a great way to do that. Or have responsibility around the house, whether it's chores or making dinner or presenting ideas or reading a book and sharing it with the family. These are all ways to present hardship. But I would suggest that first, it's meaningful. And then second, that they don't become deflated. Because as men, I think it's very easy for us to push our children so hard because we love them. It's not because we hate them. It's because we love them. So ladies, if you're listening, if you're like, my husband, you're so hard on the kids. It's not because he hates your kid. It's because he loves the kid. He just doesn't know how to do it properly. So you're going to push on your kids and you're going to lean on your kids into meaningful hardship to the point that they don't give up. Because if they're exhausted or beat down or they give up, or I've seen this in sports, and I've actually been guilty of this, and I hate it. I actually hate admitting it, but you're berating them or belittling them when they're playing sports, or you're living vicariously through them and they have no interest in it whatsoever. You're not actually teaching them mental fortitude. You're teaching them to be resentful towards you in life in general. So read your kids. If they're beat down and just feeling deflated and devalued and they're just hating life, that's not teaching them toughness. But if they're like, Dad, this is hard. And you're like, I know it's hard, but you can do it. I believe in you. Look how much better you've gotten this last month. You never played sports before, and this is your first year, and you didn't score, but man, you scored on that last game. Look how far you've come. See what hard work does? But they're not deflated. They actually look at it as being motivating. And then the third thing I'd say, or the last thing, I lost track of what I said, but is make sure it's something that they enjoy. Like, I used to live maybe a little vicariously through my kids and thought my kids, especially my boys, have to do everything that I do. Play football, play sports, be interested in hunting. My second son doesn't like to hunt. I asked him one time, why don't you like to hunt? He's like, Dad, I don't like being cold. I don't like being tired. I don't like being bored. I'm like, well, those are good reasons because you're going to be all three of those things if you hunt. He's just not interested. He's gone on hunts with me. He's actually been successful on hunts. He's killed animals and provided for the family, but he doesn't enjoy it. I don't need to beat him up about that. I'll continue to invite him. I'll continue to encourage him and foster and share my stories. And my oldest son loves to hunt, share stories, and he can come and be involved in that if he wants. But he likes other things. And so I'm going to be engaged in whatever those other things are if they move him, nurture him towards being a good and productive man in society. So find outlets that your kids like, not necessarily what you like, and I guarantee they'll be a lot tougher if it's things they like. All right, let's go to Ryan O'Hare. He says this, I've heard both you and Kip talk about trying to bring a good attitude and energy to your family time. I'm struggling to bring a fun or happy attitude to the interactions with my two teenage boys these days. Feel that, Ryan. There are some household chores that they know they need to do regularly, and it seems like they need constant reminding and still do a subpar job. Any tips on how to set my mentality and bring happiness to our interactions while still holding them to standards they are fully capable of meeting? Well, here's one thing I've found, and I'm only speaking from experience, is that at some point in my parenting, and I've been a parent now for a little over 16, almost 17 years now. Holy cow. You don't need to be a dictator, but things do need to get done. And so I think you need to make sure that they understand the connection between responsibility around the house and being part of the family. So I don't think you're wrong for doing that. And I also think that there's a standard. And so if they don't hit the standard, then you tell them to do it again. If they don't hit the standard, you tell them to do it again. The problem is that sometimes that's all we are. I don't want to speak for Kip, but I think Kip could probably relate with this as well. He's talked about it, is sometimes we're only the authoritarian. We're only the disciplinarian. We're only the person who administers the chores. We're only the person who deals out punishments when they don't do what they're supposed to do. And so every time we do that, we take a little bit out of the emotional capital bank account. And that's not bad necessarily if you do it correctly. For example, if you have a bank account with $10,000, is it bad to have a withdrawal? No. You might need $1,000 to pay the mortgage payment, or you might want to take out $2,000 and do something dumb like Kip did and take his family to Disneyland. Like, you might want to do that. And it's not bad. The Disneyland thing is, but taking your family on vacation is not bad. Go ahead and do that. But you need to make sure there's enough money in there to pull out the $2,000. Because if there's not enough money in there, then it's bad. You're overdrawn and you're going to have some financial repercussions. It's the same thing with your emotional account. If you're always the disciplinarian, if you're always the buzzkill, if you're always the party pooper, if you're always the do your chores, if you're always you didn't do it right, if you're always work harder, if you're always, you could have got an A instead of a B, and that's all you ever do, you're overdrafted, right? You're overdrawn on the account. So what you should probably consider doing, Ryan, is making some deposits into the emotional account. And what does that look like? I know I'm giving Kip a hard time about Disneyland, but it looks like taking your kids to Disneyland. It looks like when they do a really good job on their game, instead of saying you could have done better, saying, dude, you were amazing. Man, that second at bat that you had, you battled that pitcher and you came back and you ended up getting that double. Oh my gosh, incredible. Or if they're like, hey, Dad, you want to go play basketball? And you're thinking, chores need to be done. Sure, yeah, they do. You can do the chores. But what about a 20 to 30 minute, maybe even 60-minute little deposit in the emotional bank account by going out and just playing basketball with your kids? Come back, say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we got to do these chores. We'll do it after. Let's go do basketball. But we have to do it after, okay? They're going to agree with that. And the more that you put into the bank account, the more that you can withdraw. And by the way, when you do, you'll have a lot more respect from them, right? If you say, hey, kids, look, we played basketball this morning. I love the time, but we got behind on the chores. We need to get that done. I think they're going to be a little bit better about getting those done because they know that your relationship with them was a bigger priority than cleaning the toilets in their bathroom. I would also say, like I said to Bryce earlier, find things that they're interested in. Again, hunting, they doesn't like hunting, so that's fine. Let's go find something else. Next year, he loves sneakers. He loves tennis shoes. I don't really care much about them. He does. He likes it. So next year, him and I are going to go to SneakerCon. It's going to be 2 days, and I'm not going to know what he's saying, and he knows all the shoes and what they cost and this and that, and he knows all of that stuff. So he'll be teaching me and showing me, but I'm going to be there and I'm going to be fully present. I'm not going to be on my phone. I'm not going to be taking calls. I'm not going to be pushing him aside. I'm going to be there with him, having fun doing that because it's the emotional bank account. So it's a balance, right? It's a balance sheet. And it's maybe not so much of a science all the time as it is an art with kids, but it is a balance sheet. Deposits, withdrawals. What does it actually look like for you? All right, let's take the last one here. Got a lot on kids today. This one comes from Joe Gunter. He says, I'm looking for advice regarding my teenager, 18 years old, ready to graduate high school, stepdaughter, and let's see. Okay. Regarding a teenage stepdaughter and the constant never-ending battle between her and her mom. Oh, yeah. As the stepfather, I am trying to be patient, understanding, and kind. During some particularly nasty battles where she is being a complete a-hole to her mom, I let her know that she was not going to be disrespectful to my wife. I think that's good. She does not try to fling fiery darts at me anymore and watches what she says around me about her mom. As the battle trudges on between the two, she is still being a disrespectful little turd. As a stepfather, there's a hesitancy to get in and mediate. What's my play here? Sincerely, hunkered down in the trenches. Well, good luck, Joe. Good luck. Here's what I would say. I don't know how long you guys have been together, but I think one of the first things that needs to be established is what role your wife is looking for. How involved, and it might seem obvious, but you don't know unless you've had the conversation. What is it that she actually wants from you? Have you had that conversation? Hey, hun, when you and our daughter get into debates and everything, I feel a little bit apprehensive, whether you want me involved, whether you don't want me involved, whether you want me to discipline, not discipline. Here's my perspective. Always share what you think, because otherwise it just comes across as too passive and you don't want to be that way. My perspective is that you're my wife and I'm on your side, but also if I can see it from her angle differently than maybe you can, then I think I might give her a perspective. I don't really think it's your job to mediate, to be the referee. that doesn't seem right to me. I think your job is to be a teammate with your wife and also with your child. But you're not mediating between the two. And I think that mentality might be a little bit of a hang up. So you're on your wife's team. It seems like you do a good job of saying, hey, you won't be disrespectful to my wife. But I think there's an opportunity here to probably talk with both, and I would say separately in this case, both your wife and your daughter, because I know your daughter, you're saying, is being a disrespectful little turd, but maybe your wife is too. And I've seen that. And so maybe there's an opportunity for you in a very polite, respectful, tactful way to say, hey, hon, look, you came down a little hard on her, and I'm not sure. Would you mind if I shared my opinion with you? Be aware of the answer and be aware of the timing when you ask that question. If it's right after a fight, probably doesn't want to hear your opinion. Day or two later, maybe it's more appropriate. But you can read the room a little bit and determine and say, hey, I think, and then whatever you think. Now, with your daughter, it's the same thing. Hey, hon, look, you and your mom are going at it a lot lately. I know it's hard. You're an 18-year-old girl. You probably want some independence. You're going off to work, or you're going off to college soon or whatever, and life's starting. We need to be respectful because that's your mom, and she's been here for almost 2 decades of your life, and she will continue to be here for you. But, man, you just seem really upset lately. Is there something else going on outside of what's happening here? Because I found that to be the case. I've got a close personal friend who had a very similar conversation with me about his wife and his son, his oldest son. And I think based on the conversation that we had, there was a lot more going on with the son than the contention between the mom and son. And also the mom was doing some things that was helping fuel the contention from the son. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. And I think if you can isolate what those moving parts are and be on everyone's team, because the goal is the same. In mediation, I think, or even if you want to look at it from another analogy of a referee, you're working with 2 competing sides. Or mediator, I think about civil law or divorce, for example. Mediation is 2 competing sides. Their interests are at conflict with each other, and so there needs to be a mediator to make sure it's done fairly and respectfully. You're not on competing sides here. You're on your wife's side, and you're on your daughter's side. You just need to help them see where the common ground is. And I think by having those types of conversations and being aware and respectful of both, I think will help move that in the right direction. I hope that helps. I've not been in that situation, so I'm giving you just at least what I've heard and what I've seen to be effective and what I know based on similar circumstances and situations. So please let me know how that goes. All right, guys, we got through a lot of questions today. I think I've got 3 or 4 more that I'm going to save for next week, and we'll kick things off with those questions next week. If you have additional questions, a great place to join us is in the Facebook group. I would also suggest that you look into the Iron Council. I really want 2025 to be a big year for you, and I know you do too. My question is, how long have you been saying that? 2024 was a warm-up. 2023 was a warm-up. 2021 was a warm-up. Well, damn, how many warm-up years do you need to have? Warming up means you're getting ready for actually executing. And if you're not executing with your family, a lot of questions about kids here today, for example, or you're not executing at your work or your fitness, then you need to do something different. And the Iron Council can help you do that because we have all the tools and resources, and you're going to communicate and work directly with 1,000 other men who are all on the same path. So now you can talk to this other guy who's having the same situation with his stepdaughter and wife. Or you can talk with the other guy who has kids and he's being the authoritarian and he needs to ease off a little bit and create some fun. Or the guy who was 50 pounds overweight, but this year, 2024, he lost 47 pounds. He's got 6-pack abs and he's going to go run his first marathon later this year. Or the guy who started a business in his basement and now he's has an office with 5 or 6 employees and he's making $200,000 a year. Or the attorney that you need advice from because you're going through a divorce and that guy's willing to share some insiders, offer some suggestions for you, or financial planning, or fill in the blank. The Iron Council is where it's at. So if you're interested in that, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. All right, guys, great questions today. I know this is a little bit better and dynamic when Kip is here. He's going to come back, and it'll be better when he's here. I always enjoy my conversations with Kip. He's been a friend for a long time. I miss him when he's not here on this podcast, so hopefully I was able to do okay today. If you have additional questions, reach out, connect with us. I'm very active over on Instagram. And one other ask I would say, we're really trying to build up our YouTube channel. I think YouTube is playing games. We've got 40,000 subscribers over on YouTube, and our videos are getting like 1,000 views. It's just not being seen. They're not promoting. We're doing some things on our end to make sure that we boost that up so more men can hear about this mission. But it would be helpful if you went to YouTube and you subscribe to the Order of Man channel, clicked like, subscribe to it, watched a few videos, shared them here and there. That's what's going to help grow this movement, things like that. And that is very much appreciated. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. Go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.